Ready to turn your data into a tasty pie? Let's check out PieChart in the FL chart. Hi there, this is Imaneo. Welcome to my channel. So in this video, we are going to take a look at the PieChart in FL chart. So if you don't know what FL chart is, you can watch the video above. And basically, it is a free and open source library or package for Flutter. You can use it, and it supports 5 different kinds of chart at the moment. The first one is LineChart, the second one is BarChart. We have PieChart that we are going to take a look at it today. And then we have ScatterChart and RadarChart. So basically you can import the FL chart into your project, and then you are able to use these kind of charts in your app. So let's jump into the PieChart details. Basically you can click here to see the documentation. By the way, this is a markdown documentation that we have at the moment. And later, maybe when you are watching this video, we have a dedicated website for the documentation, and you can always check the PieChartData.dev. It is the landing page that we have for the FL chart, and here you will find the docs link, so you can click on it, and here it opens the markdown file. But in the future, we will change it with a dedicated website that this button opens. So always check the landing page, and you can click on the docs to see the updated documentation. Also, we have some examples here. If you open it, it is in app.flchart.dev. So we have some samples here. You can take a look. We have BarChart. Here we have PieChart. So these are the samples that we have for PieChart. And now I'm going to explain how it works. So let's get started. Here I have a fresh new project. So here we have a home page, and in the home page we only have a scaffold and a centered text widget. And here we have the empty text. As you see, this is the result. So I'm going to replace this text with a box that we can put the FL chart inside that. First of all, I need to install the FL chart dependency. So you can open the pub.dev, and if we search for FL chart, in the installing, you see that here it says how can you install the FL chart dependency in your Flutter application. So I'm going to run this code. Flutter pub add name of your package, and in this case we are adding FL chart. And if you run this command, it adds the dependency in your project. So if you open the pubspec.yaml, you see that we have the FL chart dependency here, and this command tries to find the latest version of the package, and to make sure you can compare this version 0.67.0 with the version that we have here. So yeah, as you see in the pubdev website, we have FL chart version 0.67.0. And also in the FL charts GitHub page, you see that in the releases section, the latest one is the 0.67.0. Okay, so now let's have our PieChart here. At first, I'm going to create an empty container. I can say I want to have an aspect ratio. It is 2, for example, and child is a container, and color is colors.blue. Okay, so we need to remove this constant here because container is not a constant. And if I hot reload, yeah, you see that we have a box here, and we can put the FL chart inside that. And I'm going to change the aspect ratio to 1 because a pie chart is like a circle, and then we can put it inside a square just like this one. And then we can have a margin, for example, here. Yeah, 20 is good. By the way, let's disable the copilot here. Okay, now we have a box, and then we can put the pie chart inside it. So let's see how we can do that. Let me open the PieChart documentation. It is here. If you scroll down, you see that you can add the pie chart using this snippet. So basically it is a pie chart, and inside that you have PieChart data. So this is a pattern that we have for all kinds of the charts that we have. For example, you can have line chart and line chart data. you can have BarChart and PieChart data inside that. So in this case, we are working with the PieChart and we have PieChart and PieChart data inside that. So let's add the PieChart here as a child. Yeah, as you see, PieChart is a widget. It is implicitly animated widget, and you can put it inside the widget tree of your Flutter application. As a data, I will pass a PieChart data that is empty for now. If you hot reload, nothing happens because it doesn't have any data to show. So let's see what properties do we have here. By the way, you can either check the documentation here in the markdown file. We have PieChart data. Inside that, we have the properties that you have. For example, sections, CenterSpaceRadius, CenterSpaceColor. And for example, sections is a list of PieChart section data. And you can click on the PieChart section data to open the documentation of this one. And again, you have some properties here. And yeah, so you can either read the documentation here or you can read the documentation in the source code. If you command click or control click on the PieChart data, you see that we have all the properties here and everything has the documentation inside the code. So it's up to you. You can read the documentation here or in the markdown file that we have. Okay, the first property that we have is sections. So it's a list of PieChart section data. And if you open the PieChart section data, you see that you have a bunch of properties here. And the most important one is the value. So it determines the value of your PieChart section data. Okay, so let's have a sections here. We can have a PieChart section data, PieChart section data. And let's say that we want to have a 10 as a value here. And 20, 30, and 40. So the point is that 100 is the sum of these values. So if you hot reload, you see that we have a pie chart here. Let me remove the background color. If you take a look, you see that it starts from here. The first section is 10% because we have 100% around the chart and sum of all values is 100. And this is 10% of the whole, this is 20% of the whole, and this is 30% of the whole, and this is 40% of the whole. The point is that you are not restricted to have these kind of values that 100 is some of them. You can have, for example, 10 and 10. So it takes 10 of 20, some of them, which means 50%. And for example, if you add another one of 10, you see that all of them takes 1/3 of the space. Okay, now let's revert back the numbers that we had. 10, 20, 30, 40, and let's another one as a 50. Okay, so let's take a look at the properties that we have here. The first one is value, that we already explained it. And the second one and the third one is color and gradient. So it is simple. Let me add a color to all of them. And if you hot reload, you see that it determines the color of your section. And for example, you can have different colors. Yeah, so you can either provide a color or a gradient. The gradient property is simple. It's like Flutter's gradient. We use the same definition that we have in the Flutter itself. So if you open it, you see that it can be sweep gradient, linear gradient, or radial gradient. So for example, if you open the linear gradient, you can read the documentation. It is written by the Flutter team. Here there's a video, you can watch it. It explains how linear gradient works. So I'm not going to talk about the details of linear gradient because Flutter has a great video about that. But I'm going to use a simple linear gradient here. We can say linear gradient, and here you can provide a list of colors that you want to show the gradient. For example, we can say colors.red and colors.blue. And if you hot reload, you see that it gradients from red to blue. And also you can have radial gradient. If you change it to radial, you see that it starts from center to the edges of the section. So if you provide both gradient and color, the gradient field overrides the color. So it doesn't matter what value you have here. For example, if you have green, it doesn't work because gradient always overrides the color. Okay, so let's revert it to red that we have. Okay, so let's take a look at the next property. The next property is radius. So it is basically the radius of the sections that you have here. The default value is 40, as you see. So you can, for example, change the radius of this section to 50. And as you see, it increases. The default one is 40 and this one is 50. And you can do the same for others. For example, here we can have 60. Here we can have 70. As you see, here we can have 80. And here we can have 90. Yeah, as you see, we have different radius for different sections that we have. And the next property that we have is showTitle. So it determines to showing or hiding these titles that we have here. If you set it to false, you see that the title that was here is disappeared. And yeah, this is a simple flag to show or hide the titles. And the next one is the title style. So basically you can set a style for your title. For example, you can say title style is a text style. Color is white. Font weight is bold, and font size is, for example, 20. And if you hot reload, you see that the text style changed here. Let's change it to 80. We can do the same for others, or maybe we can define a text style here. And we can use the same reference for the sections that we have. Okay, let's change this text color to black to have contrast here. We can copy the color to colors.black. So the next property that we are going to take a look is the title itself. By default, it is the value.toString. For example, here we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. These are the values which change the double to a string to show them as a title here. So you can, for example, change this one to A, for example. We can change this one to B. C, D, and E. And the next property that we have is the border side. If you set the border side, you can have the border color around the sections that you have. And the default value is a border side with a width of 0. So it does not show anything. But you can, for example, have a stroke width for this one, the yellow one. You can say border side is a border side. Inside that, you can define the width. We can say 2, and color can be colors.black. And if you hot reload, you see that we have a black border around the section that we have here. And let's change it to 4, for example. Yeah, okay. And the next property is badgeWidget. So basically it is a widget that we can show on the PieChart section. So you can either decide to have a title, a normal text here, or you can have a badgeWidget. So let's see how does it work. For example, here we can have a badgeWidget, and inside that we can have icons dot this one, for example. And if you hot reload, you see that you have a widget on top of the title that you have. You need to remove the title. Yeah, so we have a widget in the section that we have. You can have any kind of widget that you want. For example, you can have a button here, a text button. Yeah, and unpressed is nothing, and the child is text of E. If you hot reload, you see that we have a clickable widget here. So basically you can put any kind of widget that you want here. And if you take a look at the samples, you see that here we have an animated widget. If you see when you hover your mouse here, there's a widget that animates because it's Flutter and you can do anything that you want with the widget. So if you want, you can check the source code here. You see that we have a badge widget here. It is badge, and inside that we have some kind of animations. You see that we have animation container, we have box decoration, we have shadow, and as a child we have an SVG picture widget. So the result is this one. You see that we have shadow, we have a stroke border. Yeah, basically it's a widget and you can do anything that you want. The next property is title position percentage offset and badge position percentage offset. So this is basically the position that we have for the titles and the badges inside the section. It is half by default, 0.5. It means that the title and the badge are in center of the section. So for example, you can change the radius of this section to 180, for example. Yeah. And if you change the title position percentage offset to something like 0.8, you see that it goes here, the farthest point of the section. And if you change it to 1, you see that it goes here. So basically it's a value between 0 and yek. 0 means here, the starting point of the section. 0.5 means here, the center point, which is the default value. And 1 means the farthest point that we have. You can have different values for the title position offset and badge position percentage offset. So if you take a look at the samples, you see that, for example, here we have title and also we have badge. So you can have different offsets for the title and the badge that you have. Now let's get back to the PieChart data. The first property was sections, and the next one is CenterSpaceRadius. So the default value of this one is double.infinity. So it means that it takes as much as space that is available for the center space. So for example, if you increase the radius of this one, the center space decreases, and because it wants to have 170 radius, and so we have less space for the center radius. Or you can define it manually. So if it is double.infinity, the chart knows that, okay, it needs to take as much as space that is available for the chart. But for example, you can define your own radius here. Let me add it here. You can define, for example, 100. If you hot reload, you see that we have 100 radius here. If you change it to 0, it starts from here. So we don't have any space in the center of the pie chart. So let's change it back to 120, for example. Yeah. And the next property is CenterSpaceColor. So this is the color that we have for the center space. And the default color is transparent, but you can define your own color. For example, colors.black12. And if you hot reload, you see that we have a transparent black here. Let's change it back to, for example, deep orange maybe. Yeah, as you see, it fills the area with a color. And let's change it back to black, for example, 45 or black 12. Yeah. So the next property is section space, and it is 2 by default. So this is the space between the sections that we have. If you change it to, for example, 8, you see that we have 8 points space between the sections. If you change it to, for example, 24, the space increases. Yeah, it is simple. Let's change it back to 8 or maybe 4. Yeah. And the next property is StartDegreeOffset. So this property determines where the pie chart should start to drawing the sections. For example, it is 0 by default. It means that it starts from here. This is the first one, this is the second one, A, B, C, D, E. And you can change this offset. It is in degrees and it is clockwise. For example, if you set it to 90 and hot reload, you see that the chart starts from here. So we shifted the starting point from here to here. We added 90-degree offset to the starting point of the pie chart. For example, you can change it to 45. And you see that it starts from here. It is clockwise and it starts from the right side of the chart. And yeah, it is useful for when you want to manage the starting point of the sections. And the next property is PieTouchData. So let's see what does it do. Basically, it handles anything that is related to the touch and events. For example, you can have PieTouchData. And first of all, you need to enable it. The default value is true. The other one is TouchCallback. We have MouseCursorResolver and we have LineChart. So the first one is TouchCallback, and basically it gives you the information of the event that is happened. For example, it gives you the touch event and a response, and the response is, let me check it out, PieTouch response. And inside that you have a callback, and let me print the event. Event is E and the response is R, to see what happens when we interact with the chart. Yeah, so as you see, when I hover the mouse, we have an instance of FL pointer hover event, and the response or the result of the touch or the event is a PieTouch response. So let's see what we have in the PieTouch response. We have the touched section. So let's print the touched section. If it is null, we print nothing here. Yeah, you see that we have something here. It is a PieTouched section. Let's see, what does it have? It is a PieTouch section data class that contains the touch section. Again, it is nullable. We have the touched index, and as you see, when it is null, we have -1 here. We have touch angle and touch radius. If you hover a section, for example this one, you see that the touch section has an instance of the section data and the index is 1. As you remember, this is the second section that we have, and if we start from 0, this one is 1 and this one is 2, this one is 3. As you see, it detects the section that I'm hovering. And if you, for example, click here, it detects the tap down event, pan cancel event, and tap up event. Or if you long press, you see that long press starts. If you move, long press move happens. And yeah, and you can do anything that you want with the touch events. For example, let's have a list of sections. I'm going to define a data class here. That's my data, which contains the value and the color and the text. Okay, so now let's have a list of this data here. I can say const my list equals this list, and inside that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 data classes, and the first property is value, which is, for example, 10, color is something, and title again is something. So let's grab the values that we have here. Okay. And I'm going to paste the values here, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And then we have colors. By the way, I'm holding Shift and Option in the macOS to have multiple cursors here. So you can modify some variables at once. And yeah, we have red, green, blue, purple, and amber. And for the title, again, I'm holding Shift and Option. Yeah, these are the titles that we want to have. And we can have a final. Okay, so now here, instead of defining different sections here, we are going to have the my list here and map the values to the section data that we have here. For example, we can say sections, and we are going to map every element into a PieChart section data. So I'm going to copy paste this code, and I'm going to convert it to a list. Okay, so for the radius, I'm just going to keep the 50 for all the elements here. I'm going to remove this list. Oh, by the way, let's keep the border side and the title style that we have for this yellow element. So I'm going to remove all the sections that we have here. And yeah, for example, we can say, let's rename it to data. We can say data.value, data.color, and data.title. And if you hot reload, you see that now instead of defining different PieSection datas in the list of sections, we are just mapping the list of data classes that we have into a list of section data that we create here. Okay, now let's add the style that we have for the last element, the yellow element here. We need to enable the border side for only the last element. So for example, if you hot reload, you see that it applies the border side for all the elements, but we only want to have it for the last element. So to do that, we need to have access to the index of each section here. So to have access to the index, at first, let me change it to a normal block of body. Yeah, we didn't change anything. We just changed the this block here. So to have access to the index, we can change it to map. It turns the list into a map of integer and value. So integer is the index and value is the value that you have in the list. For example, these data classes. So here we have a map and we are going to get the entries, and entries is a list of map entry which has the key and the value. And here instead of data we have entry or map entry, and you can get the index from the map entry dot key. As you see, it is an integer, so this is the index of the section, and the value is the value that you have inside the list. So it is simple. At first you change it to a map to have a pair of index and the data, then you iterate over the entries. So in each entry you have a map entry that contains the key and the value, and here you get the index from the key and the data from the value. So here let me paste the style. So if I hot reload, you see that it applies the border side for all the elements, but we can say if index is 0, show the border side, it shows the border on the first one. If you change it to 1, it shows it on the second one. And we can set it 4, and it shows the border around the last section that we have. And here we can have a final is last, which is this one, this logic. And the save option is to get the length of the list and decrease the length by 1 to have access to the last element. And here we can say if it is the last element, show the stroke. And also for the text style, we can say if it is the last element, use this text style, otherwise use normal text style. And if you hot reload, yeah, you see that it works. And yeah, for example, if you set length -2, it shows the style on this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the radius of a section when we hover the mouse here. So let's define a property here. At first, we need to change it to a stateful widget because we are going to have a state. And here I'm going to define an integer. It is touched index. And it is 0 by default. So here in the touch callback, I can say if r is not null and r.touchSection is not null, we can change the touch index with the r.touchSection.index. So I'm going to wrap it in the set state block, and if you hot reload, nothing happens because we just update the touch index value. And here in the mapper function that we map a data into a section, we can say if touch index is equals to the index that we are working on, we can return, for example, 80. Otherwise, we can return 50. Oh, we need to use index. And if you hot reload, you see that if you hover on the section, it changes the radius of the touched section. Or you can apply the style itself. For example, we can comment the isLast. We can have a isTouched, which says if touched index is equals to the index that we are working on, and instead of isLast, we can say isLast is equals to isTouched. Oh. And yeah, so if you hover the mouse, you see that it changed the style and stroke width of touched section. Yeah, so basically you can override the touch callback and do anything that you want with the event and with the response that you have. For example, you can enable or disable the sections by tapping on them. You can do some magic with the line press, and yeah. So the other point that I want to mention is that we have in the PieChart, we have a data, we have swap animation duration and swap animation curve. So as you noticed here, when you change a value, for example, here, when you call the set state, here you just change the touched index, and inside that we say if it is touched, the section radius should be 80, otherwise it should be 50. And the chart animates the value under the hood. So you do nothing for this animation, you just update the value. And using these two properties, you can manage the animation duration and animation curve. Let's see. For example, here you can say animation duration. Let me copy paste this code. And you can, for example, say duration of 2 seconds. And if you hot reload, you see that it takes 2 seconds to run the animation. It is too slow. Or you can change it to, for example, 100 milliseconds. If you hot reload, you see that it's quite fast. Or if you want, you can disable the animation by setting duration.0 here. And if it is 0, it just changes the value immediately. So there is no animation here. But let's change it back to, for example, 500 and see the, or maybe 300 to see the other property that we have. The other property is swap animation curve. And here you can define a curve that Flutter supports. For example, you can have curves.linear. I believe the default one is linear. So if you search for Flutter curves, you see that we have a list of curves that Flutter supports. Let me find the linear. Yeah, this one is linear. It means that it goes directly over the time. So if you want to increase the size, for example, the scale here, it scales the shape over the time constantly and gradually. But for example, here it increases the shape immediately and then gets back to the normal value here. For example, let's use it, curves, elastic out. Yeah, and if you hot reload, yeah, it's quite fast. Let's increase it to 1000, which means 1 second. You see that we have a effect here. It goes fast and it goes over the size, and then it gets back to the normal size that we want to have. Or for example, we can have ease out back. So let's try it, ease out back. Or also we have bounce out, for example. You see that it's like a bouncing effect. And yeah, by the way, you can change the animation duration and animation curve as you want here. Okay, so we covered the touch callback, and the next property is mouseCursorResolver. In this callback, this is a callback just like what we have for the touch callback. I'm going to implement it here exactly like this one. And the point is that it is not a void callback. You need to return something. It accepts a mouse cursor. For example, you can return a click here. And if you hot reload, you see that it changes the mouse cursor when you hover the chart. And based on the logic that we have here, we say that show click cursor every time. We can change it to say if r is not null. Also, we need to say if r.touchSection.index is not -1. So it means that we are pretty sure that we touched something, and then we can return click here. Otherwise, we can return, for example, basic. If you hot reload, you see that when you hover a section, the cursor changes to click. So here you can, for example, implement a click functionality, and you can implement the logic by checking if the event is FL tap event. So let me implement it. We can say if E is FL tap up event, print tapped. So if you hot reload, you see that when you tap on something, it shows the print that we have. And for example, you can show the index. You see that when you tap here, it is -1. When you tap here, it is 1. Here it is 3. Here it is 4. So you can implement your own logic, and you have a better UX here because you change the cursor to click when you hover the section. And the other property is LinePressDuration. So basically it is a duration that determines how much should you wait for the line press event. So for example, if you say 4 seconds, it means that you need to tap and hold for 4 seconds to enable the line press event. And yeah, so I think we are done. Let's have an overview over the properties. We covered PieChart data, PieChart section data. We covered the touch data. This is the touch response and the touch section. Yeah, and also in the touch section, we just check the index. You can also check the touch angle, which gives you the angle from the center point of the chart. And also it gives you the radius. So you can have these properties to implement your own logic and calculation. And yeah, so as I said, here you can find the samples. We have some beautiful samples that you can take a look, and also The source code is available here. Yeah, as you see here, when we hover a section, we enable the legend that we have here. So we just implemented the touch callback, and we just get the touched index, and we show the selected section. Okay, so if you want to support the project, you can take a look at the landing page, and inside the about page, we have a section that there are multiple ways of supporting the project. The preferred one is GitHub sponsors, so you can become a sponsor of the project to keep me motivated to work more on the project. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video. Bye.